What is up guys, Deadset here. In this video we'll go over the Skeletal Mage build with the Bones of Rathma set, one of the staple summoner options available to the Necromancer class and a strong build to adopt early on in Season 11, considering this is the set you're given with the Hadrix gift. Let's go. The basic rotation of the build involves rapidly building up essence through Bone Spikes and Devour, and then emptying the entire reserve with the Summon of Skeletal Mage Singularity. While your resources will constantly shift between full and empty, never neglect to cast a life-saving Decrepify on an upcoming pack of enemies, or to seek your melee minions on a target with command skeletons. This will eat up some of your essence, but will be vital for your success. Finally, activate Land of the Dead whenever it's up for a major fight. This dominant cooldown will all but guarantee your success. The primary damage dealer and focal point of Rathma set builds are the Skeletal Mages. Their relatively short 6-second base duration will be nearly doubled with a combination of Extended Servitude and Circle of Nihilicious Evil, and their base damage multiplied by the Circle's extra summon, the Rathma 6-piece and Jeseth 2-piece. The rune of choice is Singularity, whose unique property consumes your entire resource reserve for 3% extra damage per essence spent. This results in 930% extra damage per full resource dump on a reasonably equipped character, a staggering damage difference to the other Skeletal Mage runes. You'll have a secondary damage dealer in the build in the face of command skeletons, but it will not be focused on through gear, and its impact on overall DPS will diminish as you increase difficulties. They fulfill an important role as procs of the Jeseth set, so do not neglect to set them on a target every fresh fight. You'll add some crowd control on top through the Freezing Grasp rune, providing you with regular procs of the Warren Crispin sentence. In order to maintain this massive resource demand, you'll devote 3 active skills to essence upkeep. Your basic source of essence will be a generator, and while theoretically all of them will do the job, I recommend Bone Spikes. It is safer with its longer range versus Grimside's melee, and is a single cast versus Siphon's Blood channeling. Add to that its highest base generation, augmented even further by Raylena's Shadowhook, and it becomes a no-brainer. You have a significant freedom in your choice of runes. The default recommendation is the short stun of Sudden Impact for another proc of Crispin's sentence. The second source of essence comes from Consuming Corpses, a unique Necromancer resource that is generated largely through combat. You'll be using Devour with the Cannibalize rune to double dip on bonuses for both health and essence restoration. Note that due to the skill's lack of casting animation, you're free to spam it as much as you need. While you can keep the rune on Devouring Aura for convenience, that is best left for lazier, speed farming variations. The final source of essence generation depends on Devour, but empowers it greatly. Land of the Dead supplies you with an infinite amount of corpses throughout its short duration, allowing you to replenish health and essence almost instantaneously. During its uptime, you'll be able to get the maximum number of Skeletal Mages, all at their maximum power, for a great boost of damage. Note Land of the Dead's massive cooldown and try to save it for key fights, like Elites and the Rift Guardian. A utility pick should round out your skill selection, either to keep you safe or to provide extra damage to the build. While you can stay on an offense curse like Frailty Scent of Blood for as long as you're comfortable, it is highly recommended to swap to the defensive powerhouse Decrepify as soon as you start pushing against your gear limits. Empowered by the stunning utility of the Dizzying Curse rune and Dainty's Binding Belt, this curse will soften incoming blows even more effectively than the set-induced damage reduction. There is a viable alteration of the build that uses Simulacrum Reservoir in this slot and drops Dainty's Binding for the Witching Hour. This variant will result in higher damage output, but with less consistency, and makes the build significantly glassier. Be prepared to fish for favorable rift layouts and monster composition if you try to take advantage of it. This concludes the overview of the active skills. Now let us look through the passives. As previously mentioned, this is a Skeletal Mage centric build, and everything that augments or extends their power is priority. Thus, Extended Servitude takes a firm slot in your passive selection for the 1.5 second mage duration increase. Following a similar logic, to empower the Singularity rune, you'll be taking the flat essence increase of Overwhelming Essence. To play to the strengths of your equipped Reaper's Wraps and the constant spam of Devour, Life from Death will provide you with a consistent supply of health globes. This will greatly improve both the rate and the average power of your Singularity summons. You have a degree of freedom in your 4th passive slot. By default, I recommend Spreading Malediction. It offers an additive damage bonus against enemies affected by your curse, a boon that scales excellently with density and is trivial to keep up. Other options include Swift Harvesting for the Simulacrum variant or the Necromancer Cheat Death Final Service. Now that we've gone through skills, let's go over the gear. To preface set roll recommendations, it's important to note that pet-based builds in Diablo 3, such as this one, benefit greatly from reaching certain attack speed breakpoints, where the attack animation of the skill itself executes faster than it would at a lower attack speed rate. In simple terms, to reach the desired 24 frame breakpoint of attack speed of the Skeletal Mages, you will require 2 attack speed rolls on gear and maxed out attack speed in your Paragons for a minimum of 1.61 attacks per second in your sheet. This can easily be achieved through your weapon, the Deadset Skull Scythe, since increased attack speed is a natural roll on the item, and a second attack speed roll on another suitable piece of gear, for example the gloves or the rings, resulting in a minimal loss of other important stats. The build takes advantage of the Bones of Rathma 6-piece bonus, incorporating all 6 set pieces, the Rathma helm, shoulders, gloves, chest, pants, and boots, and leaving the jewelry for purely offensive options. Rolls-wise, this Skeletal Mage-centric setup works best with a spread of skill, attack speed, and area damage bonuses. Skeletal Mage percentage increase is a possible roll on Rathma's helm and boots, and it's recommended to seek it out on both. Area damage is the desirable 4th primary stat on both the shoulders and gloves. The Rathma chest and pants can be dedicated entirely to toughness. By taking all 6 pieces of the Rathma set, you can dedicate your jewelry to powerful damage combinations. The Endless Walk set, Compass Rose, and Traveler's Pledge add a unique mechanic that slowly increases your damage by up to 100% if you remain stationary, and drains it away and increases your damage reduction while moving. This dynamic fits the Rathma playstyle, as you alternate brief periods of movement in search of the next big fight with extended periods of stationary Skeletal Mage summoning. Seek double crit stats, area damage, and an open socket for the Compass Rose, and double crit stats, physical elemental damage, and an open socket on the Traveler's Pledge. Your remaining ring slot will ideally be taken by a Necromancer-specific legendary, Crispin's Sentence, whose effect doubles your damage against targets affected by a slow, and triples the bonus if you affect enemies with any other form of crowd control, a mighty effect that you'll trigger with a combination of Sudden Impact, Freezing Grasp, Land of the Dead, and Dizzying Curse's Stump Rock. Note that this ring is interchangeable with the cube recommendation, Circle of Nihilicious Evil, depending on your better rolled item. The ideal stats on the ring are crit chance, crit damage, an open socket, and attack speed. Dainty's Binding is the solitary Necromancer-specific belt, which compensates the lack of flashy offense powers with a mighty defensive bulwark, 50% extra damage reduction as long as there is an enemy afflicted by your Decrepify. Note that it's very likely to lose this bonus during or in between fights, as you kill off previously afflicted enemies, and make a point to reapply the curse on a regular basis. Finally, if you opt for the Simulacrum variant of the build, swap this slot for the Glass Cannon powerhouse, the Witching Hour. Lacking a specific bracer and benefiting greatly from quick resource generation, the Singularity Necromancer offers the perfect environment for Reaper's Wraps. Notably, this bracer is crafted rather than dropped, making it somewhat easier to perfect. The recipe for its creation drops off of the Act 5 final boss, Malthael. The preferred weapon and offhand combination for the build is the Deadset set, Deadset Skull Scythe and Deadset Skull Shield. The set's powers assist your resource management by requiring that you only activate command skeletons once per major engagement, and adds a massive damage multiplication incentive to your minions in doing so. Note the ability of Deadset Skull Scythe to roll a bonus to maximum essence in its secondary stats, and strive to obtain it to gain the most out of Relana's Shadowhook. When it comes to legendary gems, Bane of the Trapped is a potent source of additional damage, as it is its own multiplier in your total damage calculation. You'll be proccing this gem consistently with a combination of Bone Spike's Sudden Impact and the strong Decrepify Slow. Enforcer is a pet-oriented gem that both increases your summon's damage multiplicatively and lessens the damage they take. This secondary bonus grows in value during Greater Rift progression, where summons start taking considerable amounts of damage and die on a regular basis. Zai's Stone of Vengeance is another independent multiplier, whose range-dependent amplification can be easily maxed out by the long reach of Skeletal Mages. The level 25 property will add some minor control and safety to the build, as well as another proc for Bane of the Trapped and Crispin's Sentence. In Kanai's cube, the weapon slot will be occupied by Relana's Shadowhook, whose power scales your damage multiplicatively based on maximum essence. This places a strong emphasis on expanding your resource pool via overwhelming essence, maxing resource in paragons, and attaining a high maximum essence in the secondary stats of Deadset's Skull Scythe. A long-standing pet staple, Tasker and Theo are cubed in the armor slot for the 50% multiplicative attack speed bonus to your summons. Hidden away in the jewelry slot of the cube, Circle of Nihilicious Evil will double the number and extend the duration of your Skeletal Mage summons, making it an inseparable part of the Rathma build. For your Paragon points, max out movement speed up to the 25% cap, then follow it up with maximum essence, and finally intelligence in the core section. Go for the crit stats, then attack speed and CDR in offense, max out armor, then life percentage and all resistance in defense, and finally area damage and resource cost reduction in utility. Now that we're done with the progression build, let's go over the speed farming variation. When it comes to adapting your skills, you'll most importantly accomplish this by exchanging the slower and controlled pace of Singularity for the weaker but much more essence efficient Skeleton Archers. The damage drop won't be noticeable in regular rifts, but the ease of resource management definitely will. Note that this mandates the change to cold damage on gear instead of physical. You could also consider swapping the Cannibalize rune on Devour for the farming convenience of Devouring Aura. Note the extension of the aura radius through gold pickup radius, an important factor that you'll influence through gearing that I'll talk about in a second. You should also swap the defensive Decrepify curse for the automated offense staple Frailty with Aura of Frailty. Similarly to Devouring Aura, this rune scales with pickup radius. You should exchange your Bone Spikes generator for the mobility of Blood Rush, augmented by the double charges of Metabolism. In the passives, replace progression staples like Overwhelming Essence and Life from Death with powerful farming passives like Final Service and Dark Reaping. When it comes to gear adaptation, the balancing act of the Endless Walk set greatly diminishes in usefulness during normal rift farming. When doing farming content, the recommended jewelry replacements are an Avarice Band and a Hellfire Amulet. Avarice Band is an Act 3 cash legendary that, in conjunction with a Gemmed Boon of the Hoarder and a Worn Gold Wrap, will render you practically invulnerable during normal rift farming. Note that it also extends your pickup radius to the whopping 30 yards as you pick up gold, enabling a near screen-wide effect to both Devouring Aura and Aura of Frailty, and spreading Malediction as a result. While any well-rolled amulet will do, you'll ideally finish off the farming jewelry with a Hellfire Amulet and a helpful 5th passive. Since you'll be dropping Decrepify in favor of maximizing offense and utility, you should make up the toughness loss with a gold wrap in the place of Dainty's Binding. Finish off the farming staple items by dropping Reaper's Wrap's resource regeneration for the extra elites of Nemesis Bracers, feeding nicely into a cubed Ingium. When it comes to gems, in speedruns, the proper ranged positioning can be left out in favor of faster advancement through the rift and looting enemies with reckless abandon. Thus, the value of a gem like Zai's Stone of Vengeance diminishes, and it's best replaced by Boon of the Hoarder, part of the gold utility triumvirate that I've talked about. In Ice Cube, it's recommended that you swap out Raylena's Shadowhook for the weapon slot in Ice Cube. Its damage multiplication is welcome in the progression variant, but it ends up being a slower option to simply cubing in Guillaume for speed rifting. This farming staple cuts cooldowns by 10 seconds flat for a generous 15-second period after killing an elite, ensuring very high uptime of vital corpse generation cooldowns and resulting in higher damage overall. And this is it for the Rathma Skeletal Mage's Necromancer. Give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed the guide, subscribe to the channel if you enjoy my content, and talk to me on Twitch and the social media linked below. I'd like to take a moment to thank Icy Veins, the gracious host of my guides, as well as the people that subscribe to my Twitch channel for the month for supporting the content I create. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I'll see you guys next time.